strategy committee in the school, which consists of a leadership team, teachers, assistants and parents too. And the idea is within this committee, we're looking to drive forward digital strategy, which is helping to improve the professional learning of staff and support our families as well, to create our family of learning community with regards to digital strategy and e-learning. So if we can just have a look at the agenda for today. Please know that if there's any comments or questions, you can use the chat, or you can leave them until the end where we have a form which you can add any comments or questions. This PowerPoint will also be available within the files section of the meeting, and it will also be recorded. So I wonder if Emma, would you be able to start recording?
So Miss Newton, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can find that this has been recorded, and you'll be able to find that in Cognita Connect repository, so that it can be watched at a later date if you would like to refer back. Okay, so it doesn't take long for you to find some pretty scary headlines. There's a few here that when I started to research online e-safety, these are the ones that popped up. And I'll admit, when I was put myself forward to do this webinar, I was quite worried and scared and quite overwhelmed. It's quite a scary topic. And I think like many others feel overwhelmed by the pace at which the internet, technology, digital age is advancing. And I think it's really hard to keep up. And with that said, it's something that I think is going to be around for a long time. One of my colleagues here, when we had a training day recently, described it as the genie is out of the bottle, which really sort of resonated with me in that we are in a digital age, and I don't think that we should be scared. I think that we need to recognize that we need to protect children, we need to protect one another, and we need to understand exactly what it means to be safe online. The risks are different for different ages, and I think there's evolution for all of us. So with that said, I'd like to ask you a question, and it's a rhetorical question, just to plant the seed. What does online safety mean to you? And I want us to start to think about this, and to help you, I'm going to start a short poll. So in a minute, I'm going to jump back onto Teams, and I'm going to start a poll, which means that you will receive some questions. A question with some answers. You need to select one of your answers and then press submit. And then when you're done, there's a small button and you can press done. The poll answers will appear anonymously in the chat. So I'm going to start that now. Okay, so you should see on your screens a question. It says, what do you think the biggest risk is to children online? Do you think it's cyberbullying, grooming, radicalization, sharing personal information, encountering inappropriate content, or screen addiction? If you could select one and press submit. Great, we've got some coming in. So you should be able to see in the chat, we've got cyberbullying at 12%, screen addiction at 50%. Other 11, great. %30 for encountering inappropriate content. Great. Interesting. So far, I'm going to continue, but you can still continue to use the poll if you would like. I will keep it open. So far, we have the largest response is screen addiction. So let's have a look. Oh, sorry. Okay. From my research, I found that they are all risks. And I think we know that they are all risks. But according to recent statistics, and this is from Kids Online Safety, they're 2019 statistics, but they're the most recent that I could find, that actually encountering inappropriate content is our biggest risk online. It says that 70% of kids encounter sexual or violent content online while doing homework research online on the internet. So as we've seen then, that this is something that is the biggest risk, it is imperative that we teach our children how to be safe online. So what do we do? At BSB, in addition to having controls which do not allow children to access certain content on the web and on their school devices, we also use a curriculum designed by Common Sense Education. Common Sense Education is an organisation that, in their words, provides education and advocacy to families to promote safe technology and media for children. At BSB, we teach children to take ownership of themselves and their digital lives. We show pupils how to be safe whilst online, and becoming a digital citizen with this curriculum is providing our children with the strategies and the skills that they need. It's packed full of real world resources and lessons which equip our students to be safe and resilient and resourceful within a digital age. The curriculum we use is made up of 6 timely topics, which we address. So one being media balance and well-being, privacy and security, digital footprint and identity, relationships and communication, cyberbullying, digital drama and hate speech, and news and media literacy. We use this digital citizen curriculum is all the way from reception age to the early years where I work, all the way up until year 6 currently. And I'm just going to example one of the lessons that is in the privacy and security topic of the curriculum. And I've actually done this with my class recently. And so it was quite interesting with my 4-year-olds, 4 or 5-year-olds, to see what their reaction was. So this is called The Internet Traffic Light. This is a poem or a song, it's kind of a bit of both, with a visual aid that children can really relate to, with it being a traffic light as well. That's something that they recognise. And it teaches them to use safe strategies whilst surfing the web. I'd just like to show you just what the song is. So I'm going to try play it now.
Go to
Here we go.
sites we trust. Yellow means slow. Being safe is a must. red means stop. Ask if it's okay. Trust your gut to go the right way.
Okay, that was just a short snippet there. It does actually start, it repeats the poem and the song, but it's a really nice way for the children to understand exactly what they need to be doing, and the strategies that they need when they are surfing the web. Quite interestingly, the feedback from my class was that they didn't want to see anything on the internet that might give them any nightmares. So that was something that was quite interesting as a feedback. They do recognise that there are things online that they shouldn't be that they shouldn't be accessing, and that they know now how to speak and how to access help and support should they need. So digital common sense media has many more resources and videos and poems and easily accessible and relatable resources like these, both for school and at home. And with that, I would like to now pass you on to Katie, who is here. Katie, are you?
Hello, yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so let me just, oh, I don't know what's happened here. 1 second. Okay, here we go. All right, Katie.
Go.
It's good when it works. There we go.
Okay. Right, so I'm going to approach things not so much from a school perspective, but more from a parent's perspective. You know, we are in a brave new world where, whether you like it or not, there are digital devices, both at home and in school. And there are challenges that parents haven't really had to face very much in the last, well, so when we were kids, they're new challenges. So I thought I'd introduce myself. I'm Katie, and I have 3 children at the school. I have a 12-year-old son who's in year 8. So he has a mobile phone of his own, and the challenges that he has are things like social media, TikTok, and those kind of more social media challenges. I have a 10-year-old girl, and she's into things like YouTube and Minecraft. I have a 10-year-old boy who's into Fortnite and gaming. So there are different challenges, and I think that's true of all families, different children, different challenges and different situations, but they're all issues that parents are facing that they haven't really faced before. Do you want to move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the things that I'm going to talk about? So there are the parent challenges. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Having school devices at home. I'm going to focus on the school iPad. Obviously, different families have other devices and other things that they either do or don't let their children do, but I think we're trying to keep it relevant to the school and the school iPads that children are now bringing home. So I'm going to talk a bit about the challenges around that as a parent. You know, a bit about what is digital safety. We've touched on it already, and I think for primary school age kids, again, which is relevant for this presentation, I think screen use and screen time and using the technology in a healthy way is probably more appropriate than things like cyber bullying and grooming, which are probably more appropriate to slightly older kids. And then what can we do as parents to protect our children? I tried to touch on a few practical tips on things that we can do to try and control usage and educate children on how to be safe online. Right, so what are the parental challenges that we face? Again, I'd just like to reiterate that these are new challenges. The iPad was only invented 10 years ago. And it feels like every year we face more and more things that are new as parents, and we have to figure out how to deal with them. But it's not as new as it used to be, and there is quite a lot of advice out there, so that at least we're getting more and more familiar with it. it does feel like screens are becoming used for everything, especially with the lockdown and everything. For example, we want to do some cooking. The children say, can we use the internet to look up a recipe? I want to do some drawing. Can I use the internet to look up what to draw? It feels like it's used for everything from homework to being creative, to entertaining, to communicating with their friends. So the screens it feels like they're everywhere all the time. And that's true for both parents and children. We are, as adults as well, we're trying to regulate our own use. But this isn't going to go away. So we need to teach children how to manage and educate them on how to be safe. The iPad is a school device, but unfortunately it's one, and it's a good thing that it comes home, but it is another thing to manage in the home. While the apps that you can load onto the school iPad are restricted, there is the issue of the internet access being available through the web browsers. So while there are certain things that they can't, for example, YouTube, they can't access the YouTube app on their school iPads, but they can, well, they used to be able to go on to www.youtube.com. So there are things like that where there are slight discrepancies. I know from my own experience that screen time is a constant battle, and one that we are going to have to learn to live with, unfortunately. But having the school iPad is a good thing as well. It helps them with their homework, with their research, and there's all kinds of good apps on there like GarageBand and so on that they can use and do creative things with. Right, so I think, as we can see from the poll, screen addiction and screen time is a big thing for parents. How much is too much? I've done lots of research on my own to try to figure out, how much time should children be spending on screens and on devices? And I think there isn't any set guidelines. People say 2 hours, depending on the age, 1 hour. But I think there's a few things you need to take into account. What type of screen usage you're talking about, because again, now we've got homework and things online. So it's different from entertainment and free time. So I think you have to look at the child and their effect on their concentration, whether they are still doing other activities, whether it's affecting their behavior. So do they get cross when you take it away? Do they get unreasonable? And does it affect their sleep and things like that? The other issue on digital safety for this age group, I think, is appropriate content. So what they have access to and what they share with others. Again, the school has various controls on the iPad which stop them from accessing inappropriate content, particularly in school. But there is things that we can do as parents to control the access to content at home. We'll come on to some of that in a minute. Bullying and social media pressures, well, I think they are relevant. I think they're less relevant for the younger age groups that we're talking about here. Things like chats within teams are potentially an issue, and I think it's important for parents to stay involved in what their children are saying to each other online, and trying to stress that they should only say things online that they would say in person to the person. So my main focus today is going to be on screen time, because I think it's the most relevant topic for parents in connection with primary school children and the school iPad. I think the main thing also to remember is that different families have different opinions, and different children have different needs and different situations, and therefore different rules might need to be applied. And this is kind of a quote linked to that. Parenting is the easiest thing in the world to have an opinion about, but the hardest thing in the world to do. I quite like this because I know different people have very different opinions about digital use for children, and everyone has to form their own opinions and fight their own battles with their own children. So screen time, as I said before, there are guidelines out there, and the what's the organisation that
Common Sense.
Common Sense, sorry. Well, Common Sense Media have a lot of advice on there, which is really useful. You can also find lots of advice online about what is advised. And I think there's a lot online now about what they used to recommend, like 1 hour a day, is now changing because it has to, because a lot of children are doing learning online with lockdowns. So there's a lot of change. So you have to think about the type of use and what limits you put on each of those different types as educational, creative, and entertainment. One thing that is generally recommended is that you get your children to discuss and agree what the rules are up front. And it's a really interesting thing to do with your children, because you'll be surprised by how sensible they sound when they talk about these things. You know, when should they have access to screen time? You know, should they have access just before bedtime, for example? How long should they use a screen for? You'll find your children volunteering things like, oh, I think I should use the screen for half an hour, and then they run off and they spend 3 hours on it without realizing how long they've been on it. Where devices are and aren't allowed, you know, at the dinner table, in their bedrooms, the toilet. What type of screen time should be limited? You know, obviously they're going to need it for some homework, but they're also going to want to use it maybe for some personal time. Other activities, you know, it's about finding a balance. Do they spend so much time on screens that they're not doing other things around the house that they used to do, like drawing or playing an instrument, playing sport? It's all about getting a decent balance in their lives. And you have to talk to them as well about the consequences of, if you agree these rules, what will happen if they use more time, or they do gaming before they've done their homework, or things like that, which you've agreed won't happen. So again, it's very important to have very clear rules. Next slide. So some practical tips. If you can, use a different device for personal use versus schoolwork. I mean, I read on one document that you should consider the school device as a very expensive library book that you've borrowed. Try and explain to the children that it's not for their personal, you know, fun. It's for schoolwork only. And that can work, but if it's the only device you have in the house, then using it for personal use is also going to happen sooner or later. So if you can split the two, then you can control it maybe better. But if not, then there's other things you can do. So the iPad itself has built-in controls where you can put locks on screen time, PIN code locks. So you, as a parent, can go in, you can set downtime where the device locks, say a couple of hours before bedtime and a couple of hours after you think they should be awake in the morning, so that they cannot access the device. I've gone so far as to lock my children's school iPad for downtime from 4 o'clock when they finish school until 8:30 the following morning. So if they want to use the school iPad, they have to come to me and I have to put in a code. They have to explain to me what they're going to use it for, and I have to put in a code, and then that unlocks it for, you can select 15 minutes, an hour, and so on. So it's a way of controlling and then having to come to you to say, I'm going to use it and this is what I'm going to use it for. You can also put in the controls of the iPad, what the age is, and put in age appropriate limits. If you don't know how to do this, there is a very good video which we can share afterwards, but it's quite easy to do. Yeah, so there's various, you can just Google how to set parental controls on an iPad. I'm not going to go through it now, but it's quite easy to use. It's in screen time. You can make screen time contingent on other activities being completed to get the balance. So once you've done your guitar practice, or once you've played some sport, then you can have your half an hour of screen time. And if they then don't do that, then you can say, well, when you do that, then you can have this. If you decide that they can have the screen time first and then they still don't do the other thing, you can then say, well, tomorrow you can't have any screen time. Again, you should agree the consequences of breaking those rules, agree up front and follow through. If you do, and as we all know as parents, there are always exceptions. You might need to have an important meeting, or you might need to do something, and you might say, okay, you can have an extra half an hour of screen time while I do this, but make it very clear that that's an exception and that there's a reason for that, so they don't think that those rules can be bent all the time. Another thing you can do is ask other parents, ask the parents of your children's friends what they're doing, how much time they let their children have, how they manage it. Because although you might not agree with it, it will give you an idea of what other children that your children are speaking to are being allowed to do, and why they may or may not think what you're doing is fair. And really just have open conversations with your children about the risks and the realities of digital life, and why you think too much screen time is, or too much, or what content is and isn't appropriate, and get them to talk about how they feel when they spend a lot of time on devices. And then the other advice which generally comes up is keep devices where you can supervise their use. So, for example, maybe not in bedrooms, or in areas where they can access things that you might not want them to have. So be able to sort of keep an eye on what they're doing, especially if they're quite young. Here are some useful resources. The Common Sense Media have a lot of advice on there. There's lots of blog content, app reviews. So my 12-year-old came to me the other day and said, can I have Discord? I didn't know what Discord was as an app. So I Googled it on the Common Sense Media, and it has a little summary about what it is, what age it's appropriate for, and so on. So it's really useful, and also for shows that they might want to watch on Netflix. There's all kinds of things on there about what's appropriate and what isn't. They also have digital agreements. So when I talked before about talking to your children up front about what they should and shouldn't be doing, that can all be documented in a digital agreement that you write down, and then when rules get stretched, you can always refer back to it. Another book which I've read, which I found really useful, is called Tech Generation: Raising Balanced Kids in a Hyper-Connected World. It talks about really the balance, and it's quite a balanced book, to be honest. It talks about the differences and different situations that you might come across. It's a very practical book, and it's really based on lots of research as well, so it's very factual. Custodio is an app that I have used for putting parental control on non-school devices. You can do things like screen time controls. You can put time limits on different apps. You can also block certain content. You can put filters for things like pornography and gaming and so on. So it's quite useful, and there are plenty of apps like this around which you can load on for parental controls. Online videos, you can Google how to set parental controls for things like iPads. Even on different channels like YouTube, you can also put age restrictions on YouTube as well. You might not know that, but you can. Within the account that you have, you can put age restrictions, so it should filter, at least to an extent, the content. And Netflix as well, you can put age restrictions on that. And if anyone's got any other useful resources, please share them, because it's really useful for everybody. So in conclusion, digital is here to stay. I don't think we can really get away with it. It's a challenge for parents, but a little bit like smoking and alcohol, they're things that we are going to have to, when they're young, you can put more restrictions, but as they get older, the challenges change, and you have to educate them really on how to be safe and how to use their judgment. And that's a balance that you just have to evolve as your children evolve, really. And you move less from controlling it to educating and trusting and making them responsible for their behaviour. And just to say that, you know, this quote, parenting was much easier when I was raising hypothetical, non-existent children. It's all easy in theory, and I can sit here and tell you about all the theory that I've read about and all the things that I've done as a parent, but I will not lie to you, it's hard, and every day I face battles over screen time and what they can and can't do. So the reality is, it's a battle, but unfortunately it's here to stay.
Right. Just there's a last slide, but this is just with resources, references, and links to some of the content in the PowerPoint. So now we have 10 minutes or so for any feedback, if anybody wants to say anything. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Here we go. I could hear some messages popping up. Oh, yeah. If there's anything that anybody would like to say, you can pop it into the chat. And as I say, there's a link due to be added as well, which will allow, and if you think of anything at a later date, if you'd like to add any questions or comments.
Okay, and hi everyone, it's Emma Overton here. Well done, ladies. Thank you so much. Great. I mean, it is our job. It's what we do all day, every day. But it's really wonderful to have Katie, who's part of our digital strategy committee as a parent, coming in and sharing the realities of it in the home. And we work together, and we want to continue to work together. We're facing this together. Where it's not going anywhere, and your reflections are going to be really helpful for us. So Marianne's prepared a form which is going to pop in the chat now. If you don't want to speak up right now, or if you have a question that you might want to think about, if you don't mind popping it into the form, Maz and I and the Digital Strategy Committee will meet to reflect on any feedback, to see what else there is we can do to support our families. It might be future webinars focusing on different areas, or it might simply be offering some workshops on specific areas as well. So your feedback is really greatly appreciated. And so is your time, ladies. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of the parents who've attended. I hope you found that helpful. It's made me reflect on where my children are right now and exactly what they're doing. So I'm going to go and find out. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
So ladies, no questions, but what we found last time after Mark's digital safety webinar was that some parents did fill the chat in, so it gave us a chance to reflect on that later. So I'm just going to stop the recording now, and Maria